It was a dark and stormy night when 10-year-old Lily and her grandfather, John, heard the first moans of the zombies. They were huddled together in the living room, trying to stay calm as the sounds grew louder and more urgent. Lily had never been particularly close to her grandfather before, but in that moment she clung to him like a lifeline. He was a sturdy presence, his arms wrapped around her protectively as they listened to the sounds of the undead outside. For hours they stayed in the living room, listening to the sounds of the zombies as they shuffled and moaned outside the windows. Every once in a while, they would hear a crash as one of the zombies tried to force its way inside, but so far they had managed to keep them at bay. As the night wore on, Lily could feel the panic rising within her. She had never been so scared in her life, and she didn't know if they were going to make it out of this alive. But every time she looked up at her grandfather's weathered face, she could see the determination in his eyes. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, John turned to Lily and spoke in a low voice. "We can't stay here any longer," he said. "We have to make a run for it." Lily's heart was pounding as she nodded in agreement. She didn't know how they were going to get out of the house, let alone make it through the hordes of zombies outside. But John seemed to have a plan. He led Lily to the back of the house, where there was a small window that led out to the back garden. It was a tight squeeze, but with John's help, Lily managed to wriggle through the opening and drop down onto the grass below. Once outside, they could see the full horror of the situation. The streets were filled with zombies, shuffling aimlessly and moaning incoherently. Lily's heart sank as she realized just how impossible their task was. But John wasn't deterred. He grabbed Lily's hand and began to lead her down the street, moving cautiously and silently as they tried to avoid attracting the attention of the zombies. For hours they moved through the deserted streets, stopping only to rest when they absolutely had to. Lily was exhausted and terrified, but she kept going, fueled by the determination of her grandfather. As they neared the outskirts of town, they came across a small group of survivors who had barricaded themselves inside an old school building. John led Lily inside, and they were greeted by a group of frightened but relieved people who had managed to escape the zombies. For a while, they stayed in the safety of the school building, watching as the zombies prowled around outside. Lily had never seen so many of them before, and she knew that it was only a matter of time before they were overrun. But John wasn't giving up. He began to formulate a plan, talking to the other survivors and organizing a small group to make a run for it. Lily watched in awe as her grandfather took charge, his years of experience and wisdom making him a natural leader. Finally, the night came when they decided to make their escape. John led the group out of the school building and into the streets, moving silently and quickly as they tried to avoid the zombies. At first, everything went smoothly. They managed to move through the town without attracting too much attention, and Lily began to hope that they might actually make it out alive. But then, disaster struck. One of the survivors stumbled and fell, and the noise attracted the attention of a nearby zombie. Within moments, they were surrounded by the undead, shuffling in closer and closer. Lily could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she looked around, searching for a way out. But there was nowhere to go, they were completely surrounded. John stood in front of Lily, his back to the group as he prepared to fight. Lily could see the determination etched on his face, and she knew that he wasn't going down without a fight. The zombies came at them in waves, but John and the other survivors fought back with all their strength. Lily picked up a fallen pipe and swung it wildly, trying to keep the zombies at bay. For what felt like hours, they battled the undead. Lily was exhausted, and she could see that the other survivors were as well. But still they fought on, driven by a fierce determination to survive. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the streets, the zombies began to thin out. John looked around at the survivors, his face covered in sweat and blood. "We have to keep moving," he said, his voice hoarse. "We can't stop now." And so they pressed on, moving through the deserted streets until they reached the outskirts of town. There, they found a small group of survivors who had managed to avoid the zombie hordes. Together, they banded together, building barricades and setting up defenses to protect themselves from the undead. Lily worked alongside the others, her heart full of gratitude for the chance to be alive. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Lily and John worked alongside the other survivors, building a new community from the ashes of the old world. It wasn't easy, but they managed to survive. And in the end, that was all that mattered. As Lily looked around at the people she had come to call family, she knew that she owed her life to her grandfather. He had been the one to lead them out of the darkness and into the light, and she would never forget his bravery and strength. The sacrifice he had made to save her. Years had passed since the zombie outbreak, and Lily had grown into a strong and capable woman. She had taken on her grandfather's role as the leader of their community, and had spent her time working tirelessly to rebuild the world they had lost. But even as the world around her began to heal, Lily could never forget the events of that stormy night. She would wake up in the middle of the night, the moans of the zombies ringing in her ears, and she would think of her grandfather. As time went on, Lily became more and more determined to honor her grandfather's memory. She knew that he had sacrificed everything to save her, and she wanted to repay him in any way she could. And so she began to scour the wasteland, searching for any clues that might lead her to the source of the zombie outbreak. She knew that it was a long shot, but she was driven by a fierce determination to uncover the truth. Years passed, and Lily traveled far and wide, following every lead she could find. She battled the undead, braved harsh terrain, and faced countless dangers. But through it all, she never lost sight of her goal. Finally, after years of searching, Lily stumbled upon a clue that led her to a small research facility hidden deep in the mountains. She infiltrated the facility, battling through hordes of zombies and dodging traps and pitfalls. And then she found it, the source of the outbreak. It was a small vial of a deadly virus, hidden away in a heavily guarded vault. Lily knew that this was her chance to finally end the zombie threat once and for all. With shaking hands, she lifted the vial from its resting place and carefully made her way back to the surface. As she emerged into the sunlight, Lily could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it, she had found the source of the outbreak. But as she turned to leave, Lily was suddenly tackled to the ground by a group of armed guards. They had been waiting for her, and they were determined to keep the virus from falling into the wrong hands. Lily fought with all her strength, but she was outnumbered and outgunned. As she lay on the ground, the vial of virus slipping from her grasp, she realized that she had failed. But even as the guards dragged her away, Lily refused to give up. She knew that there was still hope, hope that someone else would pick up where she had left off, hope that the world could still be saved. And as she was led away to an uncertain fate, Lily knew that her grandfather would be proud of her. She had fought for what was right, and she had never given up hope. For Lily, the fight would never be over. But as long as there was still hope, she would keep fighting, no matter what the cost. The end. Epilogue. Years passed, and the small community had grown and thrived. But as time went on, strange things began to happen. People would disappear without a trace, and eerie whispers could be heard in the dead of night. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something sinister and malevolent. One night, as she was walking through the town square, Lily saw something that made her blood run cold. In the distance, she could see a figure shrouded in darkness, watching them silently from the shadows. Lily tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but the figure continued to haunt her dreams. And then, one day, John disappeared without a trace. The community searched for him for days, but there was no sign of him anywhere. Lily was heartbroken, and she couldn't help but wonder if the figure she had seen that night was somehow responsible for his disappearance. As time went on, more and more people began to vanish. The whispers in the night grew louder, and the sense of unease in the town became almost palpable. Eventually, Lily couldn't take it anymore. She knew that she had to leave, to find answers and discover the truth behind the disappearances. But as she made her way out of the town, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She turned to look behind her, but there was no one there. Just as she was about to turn and continue on her way, she heard a whisper in her ear. A cold breath brushed against her cheek, and she could feel a presence behind her. Lily spun around, her heart pounding in her chest. But there was no one there. Just the empty streets and the sound of her own racing heartbeat. And in that moment, Lily realized that she was not alone. The darkness was watching her, waiting for its next victim. And she knew that she might never be able to escape it.